Hello everyone, and welcome to my review of the upcoming Desert Omens patch. I'll be holding my thoughts on the new champion Omen, as I want to make a separate video for that since I missed the chance to play him on PTS. All I'll say for now is that looking from the outside, he is recycled abilities incarnate. But in-game, he has a unique gameplay feel. This patch is pretty light, so I'll actually start with our new skins. Our new event pass is Sands of Myth 2, featuring new skins for Lilith and Makoa, the latter receiving his first skin since 2018. Kinessa also receives a recolor of her Doomstrider skin in the pass. The original Sands of Myth was one of the better battle passes in this game, and based off this new event pass, it seems the art team still knows what they're doing with the Egyptian mythology theme. So, that's nice. What's not nice is Skin Hoarder Tyra receiving not one, but 2 new skins. We all know it can't be a year of Paladins without Tyra getting skins. Her new unlocks are summer skins, and while I like the theme, I think other champions were more deserving of skins like this. A neat little update with this patch is the lore blurbs being updated for a handful of champions. Most of it just tells us what we already know, but there are some interesting story nuggets in there. I won't spoil everything, but the main highlight for me is the new lore confirming that Leon and Xin are related. Next, I want to talk about game mode rotations this patch, or the lack of a rotation being mentioned. I guess TDM and King of the Hill are still gone for the time being. Now, let's take a dip into the balance this patch. Androxus is up first with a nerf to the Darkstalker talent. This is the talent that separates your nether steps by putting them on individual cooldowns. The cooldown is being upped from 5 seconds to 6.5 seconds. This means the time to generate all 3 nether steps is going up from 15 to 19.5 seconds, of which I say, good. Andro has established himself as the king of the flank class ever since his Revolver rework, and the new old Darkstalker cemented that status. In my opinion, a good Andro is one of the most frustrating champs to face, so any nerf to him is appreciated on my end. At this point, I'd like to stop seeing Andro in the patch notes. Hopefully these changes leave him in a balanced spot. Next is Ashe with a 1 second cooldown decrease to Shoulder Bash. Now the cooldown will be 13 seconds instead of 14. Like her last changes, I feel that this misses the point. The cooldown isn't the problem with this skill. Its problem is how easy it is to cancel due to its long windup. If they wanted to make an impactful change to Shoulder Bash, they should offer up some form of a cooldown refund if you get CC'd out of it. For now, Ashe players will have to settle for this crumb. Next up is Betty La Bomba with some nerfs. The Hail of Bombs will no longer apply a knockback to enemies hit. This is a great change. It's frustrating to be hit by a random BSGO attack and then have your movement displaced while your screen shakes all over the place. Another nerf for Betty comes to the Fiery Disposition talent. The bonus damage per tick has been almost cut in half, being reduced from 0.3% to 0.175%. To simplify, the current talent will deal damage equal to 4.5% of the target's max health over 1.5 seconds, while the new talent will only deal 2.625% damage based from max HP. This is a pretty hefty nerf, but I imagine many Betty players are still going to use this since it's still free extra damage. Next is Caspian with a change to Deadly Momentum. Ooh, I hope they're reworking it. Cooldown decrease from 14 to 12 seconds. I mean, alright. That's nice. Not sure why the cooldown was so high to begin with since this ability is garbage, but whatever. One little tidbit to note about Deadly Momentum is that the cooldowns are individual, just like Grok's totems. So you can use 2 dashes back to back and have the skill active again after 12 seconds. In my opinion, the cooldown is still way too long for such a clunky ability. Hopefully they'll rework it soon. Next up is Corvus with some healing buffs. The first going to Abyssal Reconstruction. The healing over time before the burst heal is being upped from 350 to 450. Now Abyssal Reconstruction will heal 1250 over its duration. This is a nice little buff that puts the ability in line with Furia's Kindle Soul. Well, the old one, before the talent keyword's garbage. But that's not it for Circus. Corvus, thanks autocorrect. The Mark of Fate is receiving 5% bonus healing. Now, marked allies will receive 60% of Abyssal Reconstruction's healing when not being healed directly. To put it in terms of spreading influence, the meta talent, Marked allies will get 45% of the heal instead of 40%. When healing a marked ally directly, the bonus heal will be upped from 10% to 15%. This means that Abyssal Reconstruction will heal 1437.5 over its duration. That's some chunky healing, but I feel that Corvus needed a little nudge to his numbers, so I'm happy about these changes. Next up, Dredge can no longer hurt himself with the Cursed Howitzer. Listen, I get it. This is to put Dredge in line with modern blasters. But I think this is a huge buff that makes flanking Dredge much more risky. Previously, if you took a close quarters fight with Dredge, there was a high possibility that he would damage himself with his nades. This was to incentivize good teleporter use and to try to keep opponents at range. Now, flankers need to be very careful about getting close to Dredge, since he's no longer at the risk of dying to his splash damage. I'm not a fan of this change. Next up is Inara with a cooldown increase to Earthen Guard. The cooldown is being upped from 10 to 11 seconds. It's a fair change, but I'm not a fan of changing a cooldown that's been 10 seconds for the longest time. Currently, Inara is dominant because she essentially becomes immortal once Earthen Guard is active. All those changes to the bonus healing received really took its toll. Rather than nerf the cooldown, I would have preferred to see a nerf to the bonus healing on the Mother's Grace talent. Io is up next, and she's the winner of the patch in my eyes. Lunar Leap's cooldown is going from 12 to 10 seconds. The ability is not the best movement skill in the support class, so I'm happy to see the cooldown go down. I do want to mention that with cards, you can now lower this cooldown to just 6 seconds. Definitely going to be playing with that. But that's not the big buff for Io. The most notable buff is to the Moonlight's passive regeneration, which will be increased by 30%. Instead of taking 8 seconds to fully recharge, it will now take 5.6 seconds. I think this is a great buff that can make for some more loadout diversity for Io. Currently, the best way to play Io is with Moonlight regen cards. Now that Moonlight is faster to regen at base, you might not feel as pressured to stock up on all those cards. Alternatively, you could double down on Moonlight regen if you wanted. Once again, these are great changes for the character. I personally would like to see a few more quality of life tweaks to her. Mainly to Luna, as that ability has been feeling incredibly lackluster for a while now. Next is Lex with a nerf to Discovery. The bonus damage you deal to marked enemies is being decreased from 25% to 15%. A nice change that should give some more breathing room to marked enemies. Like Betty's fiery disposition, I still see this talent being the most picked since it requires little effort to take advantage of. Next up is Maldamba with a change I never thought I would see. His base health is going up from 2,200 to 2,300. It's such a small change, but one I am infatuated with. When I started playing Paladins, the base HP of champions varied. For example, Genos used to have 2,400 at base. Back in the beta days, there were sweeping changes to a number of champions, putting their base health to 2,200. I never thought I'd see the day where a 2,200 champion would get their health increased as a balancing factor. This opens up a ton of prospective health changes for many champions who might need aid in the survival department. Anyways, let me get back on track. For Maldamba specifically, this is a nice buff. If you are running bonus HP in your deck, you can now free up 2 loadout slots for something else. Alternatively, you could double down on bonus HP if you want to be extra tanky. Maldamba has been eating so good the last few patches. If you've been on the fence about playing him, now might be the time. Just bring back Wakono's Curse, get rid of Ripened Gourd, and he's golden. Next up is Nyx with a nerf to Royal Presence. The cooldown is being upped from 11 to 13 seconds. Like Inara, Nyx has stapled herself in the meta as being incredibly difficult to kill when her main defensive cooldown is active. To which I gotta say, is so nice to see, since it means the Paladins team succeeded in making Nyx a viable point tank contender. I think this is a fair change for the character. You just have to be a bit safer with the cooldown now. Next up is Octavia with a revert to the Distortion Field's cooldown. The cooldown is going up from 16 to 18 seconds, but now the cooldown starts when the field is thrown. This is to remedy a bug where, in some cases, the Distortion Field never activates. With the current cooldown not starting until the ability ends, this meant that Octavia would lose her Distortion Field until she died. Having the cooldown start immediately is overall better for the ability. I'm still really holding out hope for an Octavia rework. Hey, if any devs are watching, I just want to point you towards my recently released Octavia rework concept. I think it's pretty good, and it had pretty good reception. My man Terminus is up next with the biggest buff in the history of Paladins. His base move speed is being increased from 345 to 350. A whopping 1.5% move speed increase, hell yeah! In reality, this makes Term move as fast as Makoa and Inara. And while small, any buff to Term's move speed is greatly appreciated, since he relies on it so much. Second to last is Vora with some buffs relating to her obliteration. The cooldown is going from 12 to 11 seconds, and the damage is going from 500 to 600. The cooldown being lowered is the more notable change here, since Vora can now dodge high impact abilities just a little more often. The damage going up does give Vora some more burst, which is something the character notably lacks. Now with 5 darkness stacks, obliteration will deal 900 damage. That's nothing to scoff at. What is something to scoff at is the buff to the Deafening Silence talent. The silence duration is going up from 1.65 seconds to 2.5 seconds. I am aware that the silence duration is quite notable, but Vora has to sacrifice her best survival skill, which doubles as her finisher, to activate it. Additionally, the silence can be reduced in duration with resilience. I do think the talent can have some potential with the cooldown buff, but I don't think it'll be worth picking over Vora's other options. Last up, Yagoroth is getting the Imani treatment. Form Swap's cooldown is going from 2 seconds to just 1. This should make the act of swapping stances feel more fluid. Overall, this is shaping up to be a decent little patch. My only complaints are pretty minor, and none of the changes are super noteworthy. That could be a good or a bad thing depending on how you view it. That's going to be it for this patch review. What do you guys think about the patch? Let me know down below. Don't forget to clap that like button and lace it down that sub button. I'm YellowNinja, and peace.